Okay, let's do a little video on using the Rockler Dovetail Jig. Okay, so first thing that we do is we're going to, under the back clamp here, you're going to put a sheet or a piece of 1/4 inch stock. What the 1/4 inch stock does is basically spaces things out that takes into account the thickness of our template. So we're going to put a 1/4 inch piece of, I've got 1/4 inch plywood here, and then you're going to put a piece of stock that you're using, right? The piece of stock that you actually want, that you're going to be cutting dovetails in. So it needs to be the same thickness exactly. Clamp that down there, and so that's the basic setup. Then you're going to start with the tails. We're going to cut the tails, right? So you get the tails template, put it on here, right on the gauge here, and you're basically going to set this to whatever stock you're using. So in my case, it says here I was using 3/4 inch wood. So it says here that when I'm doing through dovetail tails, I need to set my template up to the E reference mark. So the E reference mark's right here, if I can get it on camera. Okay, so I'll set this right at E, and I'll set it on both sides to E. Now then, when I was doing the tails, pretty much set this exactly on E on both sides, and that was fine. Okay, so set that down, clamp it down here using the screws, which I've taken out for the moment. So basically, you set this down, clamp it down. Then what you do, you take a piece of your stock, you put a piece of your stock in. Actually what you'll do is you want to size, you take a piece of your stock and you want to set this up so that your teeth are going to be even, right? The teeth are even with the piece of wood that you're cutting. Right, so sometimes you might have, depending on how wide your stock is, you might have to, move this somewhere. Okay, so in my case though, pretty much there is about right, because I'm doing, let's get the camera right over it, so I've got that evenly spaced. And then what I do is I adjust this little black bar here, this guide, you adjust that to give you that correct spacing between the teeth of the template. Clamp in your piece of wood, and then you use this to make sure that it's plumb. Okay, so you actually loosen that, set it up so that it's plumb, and then you clamp it in. Right, then once you've got your piece of wood clamped in there, right, up against the template, then you want to take, here, let me see if I can do this. So let's just say if I clamp this in here, right, that's now clamped as I'm going to cut. Take another piece of your stock, put it up there, right, and then actually scribe a line underneath here. Scribe a line right under there so that you can adjust your router bit depth setting. So scribe a line on the wood. Then what you do is you go over to your router. For tails, you're going to use the 8° for through tails. I'm going to use the 8° router bit. Install it in the router with my guide bushing installed. Then what I'll do is I bring the router over to my workpiece. I wish I had another hand, but I'll put my router on there, and then under here I'm going to adjust my router bit so that it just touches the line that I already scribed. So in other words, I'm going to be cutting exactly as deep as my stock. Okay, so once that's done, I can then get my router bit adjusted, and then I can cut my tails. Right, once you're finished with your tails, on this piece, take the piece of wood, flip it around, cut it again. Be aware, when you're cutting tails, the inside face of your, the inside face of your box or the inside face of your drawer must face you, okay? And when you're cutting the pins, the inside face faces the jig. This was, I kept messing this up, so I actually wrote to myself, when I'm cutting tails, the inside faces me, and when I'm cutting pins, the inside faces the jig. So it helps to make marks. So this is the front inside pins. So in other words, when I'm cutting pins, this front inside, the inside, right, the inside face must face into the jig. Okay. Now, so that's we've cut our tails. Then what we do is do all of your pieces, all of your tail pieces at once. Put them in inside facing out. Flip them. Cut all of your tail components. Then what you're going to do is you're going to replace that template with the pins template. Right, so let me get this right. Pins template on here. Now then, what I noticed was when I was cutting my pin, when I was doing this, if this little guide here told me I was using 3/4 inch oak, this told me that 3/4 inch oak should be using, I should put this on the F mark. And when I cut it, when I cut these, let me just get this right here. Okay. When I did this, when I set it to F here, this is when I got this set to F, it really, my joints didn't line up at all, or in other words, they wouldn't fit together at all. It was way too tight. In other words, the pins were nowhere near fitting in the tails. So what I found with 1/4 inch stock is instead of being on F, it actually, I got it pretty perfect. I put it on one line short of E here on both sides. And with my 3/4 inch oak, you know, here I've got a couple of samples, but with my 3/4 inch oak, it came out pretty perfectly, right? It's a really nice fit. So you can see the depth, or how long these will extend past the corner. That's based on how deep my router bit is set. But the tightness of the joint is basically how far front or back this jig is, the template is set. So if you want the template, if you want your dovetails to be tighter, in other words, if you find it's too loose and they wobble about in there when they're mated together, you move it away from you. That will make it tighter. You move it towards you. You'll make it tighter. If you want them to be looser, you move this template inwards more. Okay, so once we've got this installed in the right place, of course you're going to want to test this with some scrap lumber first. So we get this installed at the right setting here. Then we go over to our router and we'll now install the straight bit when we cut the pins. Cut all the pins, again, now when you're doing pins, the inside face faces towards the jig. When you're doing tails, inside face faces towards you. Cutting pins, inside faces towards the jig. Okay, so there's a couple of samples of what I just did. Actually came out pretty good with pine. Of course, when you're cutting them, just take a little care because you get a little bit more tear out with the wood being softer. With oak, it actually didn't do too badly at all. So again, probably helpful until I remember it to keep this reminder written on my scrap paper. Anyway, thanks for watching.